Welcome to today's Read Aloud video. We're starting to do some learning about Native Americans this week. Yesterday our partner reading activity was to read a story, a short little information text actually about Native Americans. Today you did the same thing. Today's Read Aloud, instead of being from someone else, will be from me, and I'll read you another story about modern Native American people, and it's written by a Native American person. So let's dive in. Our read aloud for today is a book called Muskrat Will Be Swimming, which is an interesting title, don't you agree? It's written by someone named Cheryl Savageau and illustrated by Robert Hines. Let's take a look. The kids at school call us lake rats, and that place where we live down by the lake shore they call Shantytown. People at the lake live in cellar holes, trailers, and old winterized cottages from when the lake was a vacation spot for people with money. Now, the lake is too crowded for vacationers. Now, it's where we live. I love the lake. I love the green, froggy smell of the pond out behind the dam. I love walking the shoreline every spring watching for pollywogs. I love swimming in the strong, clean current at the point. I love fishing in the rain early on April mornings and sunny August afternoons. I love skating out past the islands in January with stars thick over my head, but I don't like being called lake rat. Mornings, I liked getting up early to take my favorite path along the shore. In the gray light, I can hear the sad-sounding call of a loon and the scurrying of small animals I can't see. Ducks paddle close to the shore, and across the water a great blue heron flies up and settles in an old pine tree. One morning, just before sunrise, I come to a turn in the path. Near a fallen log among the cattails, a muskrat is preening herself in the early morning light. She turns and looks into my eyes, then dives into the water and swims away. Here's a muskrat. Preening himself means sort of looking over its fur and making sure it's feeling and looking good. Sometimes, out running errands with my father, we drive past the big white houses uptown. The yards there are clean and clipped. None of them have prickly black raspberry bushes sprawling over the backyard. None of them have old cars to play in or stacks of cement blocks someone might use someday, and none of the kids have clothes passed down from two sets of cousins. All their clothes are brand new clean, not clean from hundreds of washings, faded and soft like mine. Sometimes I feel bad about the clothes, but I wouldn't want to live in their houses, not if I had to live so far from the lake. What differences are you noticing between this narrator and her neighbors? How is she treated differently, and how does she live differently from them? The truth is, I love the lake. That's why it makes me so mad when they call us lake rats. Lake rats. What do they know anyway? I tried to tell them about the lake, what a great place it is to live, but they just laughed. We wouldn't swim in that water, they said to me. It's dirty, it smells. Bloodsuckers and snakes live in it. I tried to tell them about the turtles laying eggs on the bank behind my aunt's house every spring. Gross, they said. I told them about the dragonflies in summer, the bright blues, greens, and reds. You lake rats are crazy. That's what they said to me. So I don't tell them about the fish we catch and eat at the big fish fries midsummer under the stars. I figured they'd tell me food is supposed to come from the supermarket. So I just get quiet and don't say anything. One night after supper, Grandpa notices me moping around. What's the matter, Jeannie? He asked me. What's got you so down? Lake rats, I tell him. Lake rats, he asks. What are lake rats? Lake rats. That's what the kids at school call us. Oh, I see. Grandpa sits down next to me on the chair. Makes you feel kind of bad, huh? I just nod my head. Come on, take a walk with me, he says. I follow him down the path to the place where the pond lilies grow the thickest. As we get closer, we can hear the bullfrog's low voices and the higher voices of the green frogs. We find a place to sit on the old log. Listen to those frogs, Grandpa says. We both listen for a while, and I almost forget about the lake rat thing. Grandpa says, when I was a kid, they called us frogs. It was because we're part French and Indian. That's us. I don't know what frogs have to do with that, but that's what they called us, frogs. Thought they'd hurt our feelings. Some people do that. When they want to make you feel bad, they compare you to an animal. We don't think that way. We know animals are our relatives. We can learn a lot from them. Huh, that's an interesting way to think. We know animals are our relatives. We can learn a lot from them. Do you ever think about animals being your relatives? Is that something that your culture, your parents, your friends talk about? Well, this is a way of thinking among some Native American groups, that animals are our relatives. Let's keep reading. See those frogs? That was us. Puddle jumpers, singers, people who always have something to say. They called me a frog because they thought it would hurt my feelings. That's because they didn't know frogs. I think about what he says, and I listen to the frogs. Finally, I say, I wouldn't mind being a frog like you, Grandpa. But Grandpa, they call us lake rats. I don't want to be a lake rat. Well, what exactly is a lake rat anyway? Grandpa asks. I don't know, but it sure sounds bad. That's because you haven't thought about it. Now let's think about lake rats. Those kids who call you lake rat don't know about the lake the way you do. What kind of animal could it be, a lake rat? What do you think, reader? What kind of animal is a lake rat? I think with Grandpa for a while and suddenly see in my mind the muskrat preening herself in the water, just as I'd seen her early one morning. Let's go back and look at that. The muskrat. She looks like a friendly creature. I wonder how this little girl, the narrator, feels about being called a lake rat, now that she's thought about the muskrat that she met that morning. Let's keep reading. A muskrat, Grandpa, I said. At my words, I see the muskrat turn and look into my eyes, then dive into the water with hardly a ripple. That must be it, Grandpa says. Now, muskrat is small but important. It was Muskrat, remember, who brought Earth up from the bottom of the water and put it on Turtle's back. As Grandpa speaks, I remember him telling stories around the wood stove while we drank hot cocoa and wrapped ourselves in warm quilts and the snow piled up outside. A long, long time ago, the world was very different. There was water as far as you could see in every direction. Only fish and water animals could live in this world. But way up in the big sky, there was another world with people walking around. There was a big tree in the middle of the sky world with 4 white roots growing in the 4 directions. Wonderful flowers and fruits grew on the branches of that tree. One day, the people pulled up the tree. A big hole opened in the sky where the tree had been. A woman, one who was curious, looked over the edge. She could see something glittering far below, like sun on the water. She held on to a branch of the tree and leaned over to get a better look. Suddenly, the branch broke, and the woman fell down through the hole in the sky. The animals looked up and saw the sky woman coming. They saw that she didn't look like them, that she couldn't live in the water. She didn't even have webbed feet. So 2 swans flew up and caught her on their wings and began to bring her gently down to the world below. The animals remembered that at the bottom of the water was something called earth. If they could bring some up, the woman would have something to stand on. So all the animals tried. The duck, the beaver with its strong legs, loon with its powerful wings, but none of them could swim all the way to the bottom. Finally, a little voice said, I will swim and get earth, or I will die trying. It was Muskrat who said it, and Muskrat dove down into the water. Down, down she swam into the dark, deep water. It felt as if her lungs would burst, but she kept swimming. Finally, her tiny paws scraped the bottom, and she let herself float back to the surface. All the animals were excited to see she had earth in her paw, but when they looked around at the surface of the water and said, but then they looked around at the surface of the water and said, "But where will we put it?" Swam up and said, "You can put earth on my back." The swans brought Sky Woman down, and she stepped on to Turtle's back. She dropped seeds from the tree in the sky, and they began to grow. And so the woman from the sky came to live on this earth on Turtle's back, and that's where we all live now. "I do remember that story, Grandpa," I tell him. "We walk back home together, and I think about Muskrat. That night, I dive into the waters of my dream." My body is covered with fur, and I dive down and down and down. I feel as if my lungs will burst, but I keep on swimming. Finally, my paws scrape the bottom, and I shoot up through the water into the light. The sunlight is shining through my window. I get up and dress and go out to find Grandpa. "Let's go out on the lake, Grandpa," I say. "There's something I have to do." "Sounds pretty important," Grandpa says, and walks with me down to the water. Grandpa and I paddle, and I tell him about my dream. "That's a good dream," he says. Finally, we stop paddling, and we sit quietly, listening and watching. Then I decide what to do. I take a deep breath. "Watch me, Grandpa," I yell, and dive over the side. The water is cold, but I swim down and down just like in my dream. It feels as if my lungs will burst, but I know I can do it. I kick as hard as I can, and finally my hands scrape the bottom and close over the soft mud. I turn, push off the bottom, and swim back into the light. Grandpa is watching me over the side of the canoe. He reaches out to pull me in, and I put the earth into his hands. He places the wet earth carefully on the seat, then helps me into the canoe. "Come on, Muskrat," he says. "It's time for breakfast." So I don't worry anymore when kids call me a lake rat. I know who I am, and I know about the lake, that we're part of it, and it's part of us. Grandpa let the mud dry out and put it in a leather pouch for me so I can keep it always. Tonight, everyone will come to our house, and I'll play cards with my cousins on the bunk beds, and the grown-ups will play cards around the kitchen table. We'll eat stew or spaghetti, and something made from the blueberries we picked on the island today. Later, my mother will play the piano. One of my uncles will take up the guitar, and Grandpa will play the drum. And we'll all sing together until the whole cellar hole is rocking. Outside, the lake will still lap against the shore, while the moon looks down, and somewhere, Muskrat will be swimming. Did you like that story? I think it's a pretty sweet story. There's more information about the story here on this page that I'm not going to read to you. If you want to pause the video and try to look at it yourself, you're welcome to it. It's basically info about the story and the author. Before you go, I want you to take a look at something with me. Your next step in my classroom or in Miss Reinheimer's classroom after you're done listening to a read aloud is to go do some reading on your own. My class has a list of books that you can read right now on Epic Books. These are books that will give you a deeper sense of what it's like to be a Native American. Some are stories that Native Americans tell each other, tell their children, like When Turtle Grew Feathers. Some are stories about Native American people living today, like The Pencil or Salty Pie. And some are stories about Native Americans living long ago, like Crazy Horse's Vision. Go check it out and see if you can learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a Native American. And I will see you on the flip side, readers.